Hi, my name's TJ. This is In My Own Words, helping you create your life story. Well, thank you for joining us again. If you haven't seen the first two episodes, I would strongly recommend that you go and check those out. This is episode 3 of how to write your life story. In the first episode, it was basically an introduction. People who have been considering doing this sort of thing for a while and the sorts of things they might like to think about before they enter into the process. Episode 2 really was about the sorts of things that you might like to include as topics of conversation, memories, advice, experiences that you might like to include in your life story, what to talk about basically. In this episode, we're going to talk about the process. The process is so key because what you don't want to feel at any point is like it's impacting your life negatively because you're trying to prioritize this and you're not getting on with the other things that you need to do in day-to-day life. You also don't want to feel the pressure of not making progress. You don't want to set so many big goals that then it feels like it's unachievable in some way. The whole thing should be a positive experience from start to finish. And I think structuring your process, your timeline, is so important to making it a positive experience from start to finish. Now, in previous episodes, we've sort of broken it down into incremental things that you might like to think about and chapters. In this episode, I'm just going to list them from start to finish of hints and tips, really, that we found creating my dad's life story. Things that we found were particularly helpful, things that weren't helpful, and that we went back and we were like, let's try that again from a different angle. Things that you can basically learn to create a full project from start to finish, and things that will encourage all of that memory recollection, all of that emotional quality, and really engage your audience. So this is the process. Set clear goals. So we mentioned this in the first episode. I'm going to expand on it ever so slightly, which is you want to feel like you're making progress. That's the key. Now, in the early stages, you want those goals to be small. You want to feel like they're achievable. You want to feel like you are now on your journey. And so they might be something as trivial as just taking time to live within your memories for a short period of time. Try to flesh out as much as you can about the details of those memories. Then you might like to start writing them all down. And thereafter, I think if you're able to keep a piece of paper or a diary or a journal of how you intend to move forward, what the next task is, because it's a big project. And if you look at the whole thing all in one go, you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed and it might feel like, I'm never going to get to the end of this. I think that the nature of the goals that you set, they get bigger as they go on because you feel more and more committed to the project. But yeah, those goals are really, really important. And if you're anything like me, it's nice to tick them off one at a time. And it's also nice to look back. This is where I benefit from it massively. It's nice to look back and see how much you've already achieved. Because that can be the impetus that you need sometimes to keep going and not feel like you're lagging behind in any way. So the progress is key, and it starts with just identifying what those goals are. And so let's give some examples, I guess, would be helpful. So after the first few stages, it might be the case that you want to create more detailed notes about the memories that you've already explored. It might be that you set aside a certain day for gathering the materials that you want to incorporate as part of your process. So that might be the photographs that you're going to look over when you're looking at your early stages of your life, or when you first start to have your family. And maybe you'd like to organize those photos into sections if you've not already done so, in photo albums. And thereafter, maybe it becomes, I'd like to rehearse speaking about that particular memory, or I'd like to write a first draft of that chapter of my life. These are the slightly bigger goals that you're getting towards later on. Further down the line, it might be a case of, right, well, I'd like to now go to a small publishing company and I'd like to look at the stages of creating the book. And having that incarnation, that first iteration of that book. That's a long process in its own right, with regards to proofreading and editing, and these are all milestones that you might like to achieve. If you're filming it, it might be a case of, right, I need to set aside some time to learn a little bit more about setting up the shot, editing, learning how to edit, some of the music that I might like to incorporate into my video. A little bit about lighting, perhaps, or it may be the case that you want to go in a different direction and you might want to seek somebody out to produce your video for you and to talk to you about, where that could be shot and the likely timeline of putting all of that process together for you as well. So that's a little bit of an idea of the kinds of goals that you might like to set for yourself. Create a timeline. So now that you've got all your goals in place, you might then like to create a timeline to try and achieve those goals by a certain point in your process, so that, let's say you start in May. By the end of May, you might like to say, right, well, I'd like to have the first draft of my book written by the end of May, or I want to have that written by June. And I think one thing that's really important to do actually is cross-reference with your personal life to say, I'd like to have it done by then because I'm going to so-and-so's wedding, because it's so-and-so's birthday. You don't want to feel like it's getting in the way of the other elements of your life. I would be inclined to say, in the early stages, don't set a timeline whereby you want to have the finished project by a certain date, because the chances are you're going to run into problems, pitfalls, all kinds of things that might get in the way of that happening. So adjust your timeline accordingly, and only when you start to get to the end of your process and think, I'm really close to having something that I'm ready to either commit to paper in a book format or commit to film or audio if you're doing a recording. That's the time then to, I think, set that final deadline of going, right, I'm going to have this done by the 1st of December so that when it comes to Christmas, I can share this with family and friends. So yeah, the timeline needs to be flexible, but it also is very, very helpful to have in place. Bite-sized pieces. So when it comes to the actual structure of your book or of your recording, I mentioned in the previous episode that chapters are extremely useful for helping you compartmentalize the memory recollection and the notes that you're going to take, and also for your audience when they're watching it. They want to be able to compartmentalize the information that they're receiving. If you're talking for 90 minutes straight, the temptation might be that you go off in different tangents. It might not be particularly comprehensible or coherent. Whereas if you're sticking to certain chapters or structures, then people can digest that information more easily. By breaking down your process into those chapters, I think it also helps the memory recollection. So it's not just the delivery, it's also about notating those memories as you're going. So what we did is I gave my dad a list of things that I thought he might like to talk about, with plenty of room on an A4 sheet of paper for him to make notes about those certain things. And what that meant was, if he decided that he wanted to come and talk about his early childhood, he could do that in one section. And I think that really helped him flesh that out. But he left himself enough room where if he then went back at a later date and started to talk about his school memories, and then he thought, oh, that reminds me of something that I should add to my early life memories, there was enough room to make those additions and contributions. And also, the other thing I would say is, once you've got that skeleton structure, don't be afraid to, if you have that A4 sheet of paper, print it out again and tidy up those notes and make them more easier to read on the page, and more concise. I think that's probably good practice. So I think breaking it down into small elements and making it more manageable is crucial to making progress. Optimize your time. There's a few things to talk about in this section. So I'm going to refer to my notes as I talk to you, so that I'm making the most of my time. There you go, case in point. So the first thing is, if there is a time within the week or a time within the day where you find yourself being most productive, most energized, and you don't have other commitments going on, that is where you should be dedicating this project. That's where this project should fit in within your working week or your day. For example, if it transpires that you're looking at your day-to-day for the week and you go, do you know what, Friday afternoons would be perfect because I do the gardening at the weekend, I'm seeing so-and-so on this day, I have work commitments on a Wednesday, I'm playing bridge on Thursday nights, or whatever it might be. If there's a perfect time in the week, then you can dedicate that time to it without the feeling of guilt that you're not doing something else or you're not cancelling on somebody else. And it brings about routine as well. Now, routine is another one. So before we get to routine, let me just talk about minimizing distractions. So really, if you want a dedicated space, maybe you have a place in your kitchen with a nice open window, with lots of natural light, where you can think clearly and feel liberated and feel creative. That's the space that you want to do it. If you have a study or an office where you can sit at a computer, and that's a good thing for you because you find that you're very productive in front of the computer, then that's where you should be. You should be going through this process. For a lot of people, I imagine that writing stuff down with pen and paper will be the most cathartic way to do it and the most productive way to do it, if that's how they've organized their projects previously. I also find that if I'm in front of a screen for too long, or around electronical devices for too long, I start to get a little bit of brain fog and I start to get a bit cloudy and I'm like, I can't really focus. So I might adjust my strategy and my process to make it pen and paper so that I'm not, feeling that sense of cloudiness. Because obviously that's going to be crucial to how accurately you can remember things and how productive you are in that environment. So then, once you've identified, this is where I'm going to sit and partake in this activity and do my research, do my memory recollection, and do my notation. This is where I'm going to sit and do this. I'm going to have a cup of tea with me every single time. I know that my family, friends, whoever it might be, are out of the house and I have no other commitments. I think that is the optimum place to go into that headspace and start recalling on those memories and notating it. And if you're doing it in pen and paper, I'd keep a folder and I'd, organize and structure your notes. If you're doing it on the computer, similar thing, similar process, but digitally, make sure that you've got your folder on your desktop, which is my life story. Once you go into that folder, maybe you've got a Word document, which is early years and the notes on there, and then school life and the notes on there, relationships and my children, whatever it might be. And I think that quite quickly you will start to feel like you've really got the whole process under control. And I think that element of routine could be extremely beneficial for most people. If it's done in a scatty way, if you've got masses of notes everywhere, lots of little post-it notes and stuff like that, don't get me wrong, that can be helpful while you're in the infancy of your process and just jotting something down and sticking it. But ultimately, it all has to come together and there has to be an adhesive process that brings all of those memories and all of those notes together into some sort of structure. Collaboration. I've alluded to this before and I'll expand a little bit on it now. I can't stress enough, this is such a unique process to go through, and to share it with the people that are most important to you is an extraordinarily cathartic and energizing thing to do. My dad brought me into his process. He brought me to his house while he was looking at the photos of his family, of his childhood, of his history, which meant that not only was I able to share that process with him, but I was able to contribute as well. And I think that is something that it's going to flesh the whole project out, because other people are going to have better memories of certain occasions than you do. They're also going to have a different take on certain memories or certain experiences than you did at the time. That might be an epiphany for you, where you're able to have a context around that event that you didn't previously have. And that's the kind of detail that's really going to make it special. And it's nice to go through this process with people and not feel like you're isolated. They might also keep you on track with you. It might be nice to turn around to people, to somebody close to you who you're making part of this process, and say, make sure I do this, keep me on track. Don't be afraid to give me a little push in the right direction and say, you haven't done your chapter this week, so when are you going to do that? Yep, you're absolutely right, I need to get on it, let's do it. Because the more people that are involved, I think generally the better it will be. There's also the possibility to bring those people or different people in as part of a feedback process. So if you have gotten to the point where you've now written a chapter of your book, or you've recorded a chapter of your audio or video recording, you might like to show it to them, and they might be able to turn around and say, I really loved it when you talked about that. Actually, I'd like to hear more about that. That's really great feedback, because don't forget, these people are potentially your audience. This is who it's for. It might be the case, of course, that you want to keep it all a secret and you want to keep it special and tell your version of your story. But if you're looking for feedback, I think I would definitely recommend it, because, like I say, you want to create the best version of what you're doing, and their input will help massively with that. Be flexible. It's going to be difficult to talk about this point without sounding like I'm contradicting some of the things that I've said earlier. I can't stress enough that I would hate for it to be a burden to anybody to go through this process. There's going to be lots of points along the way where you might feel a little bit frustrated with something that's happened. I'll let you in on a little secret. These videos that I'm recording right now, when I recorded the introduction, I spoke for about 90 minutes, which we condensed down into a 50-minute episode, okay? I recorded the whole lot, and it turned out that there was a gaping hole in the curtains behind me, and you could see all of the behind the scenes behind these curtains here at the studios. And I realized quite quickly I was going to have to record the whole thing again. I had to be in a certain mindset not to be really frustrated by that. I had to remain flexible. I had to be willing to go through that process again. Here's something interesting that came out from that. The second time I did it, it was 1,000,000 times better. So if you're hitting little bumps in the road, try to remain flexible. Try not to get too frustrated with the process. Try to know that great things might come out of that by redoing it, doing it again. Second drafts, second iterations invariably are better, because you feel better. You felt well versed the first time round. You feel even better versed, if that's to coin a phrase, the second time round, because you feel like you've had a rehearsal. You feel like you've had a practice for it. So yeah, try to be flexible, and that goes with scheduling as well. Again, at the risk of sounding like I'm contradicting things I've already said, by all means, put a date in the diary to keep you focused and to keep you feeling like you're making progress, but don't burden yourself with guilt if you feel like you need to rearrange that time. That's okay. If you haven't made the progress that you wanted to make for other reasons, you might have health complications, or you might have a wedding that you need to attend, or in doing your research, you might have found something that actually what you thought was the case wasn't the case, that happened to your mum or your dad or your brother or your sister, and you might have committed something to paper or to video, and you might think, do you know what, I should go back and I should re-record that, because I've learned something by sharing feedback with somebody that said, actually, that's not how it happened, or or that might have been how you perceived those events, but this is how we felt at the time. So yeah, I think being flexible is extremely important for all those reasons. Know your audience. This is the one theme that's going to run through every single episode, because I think it's super, super important. Don't get me wrong, you can go through this process and record your life story purely for yourself if you want to. But I highly recommend that if you have an audience in mind, they are the people that are going to have this for their whole lives, right? After we're gone, they will continue to have it, or their children will continue to have it. So if you know your audience, really stick to that. And I think there's something to be said for inviting them for collaboration in terms of the things that they want to learn about. It might be worth sitting down and saying, is there anything you've ever wanted to learn about or know about with regards to myself, my life, my background, my own parents? Because I think that can help shape the sorts of topics that you're going to talk about. And it can act as a sort of stimulus, or a sort of foundation that everything else is built on. So yeah, always keep your audience in mind. Record conversations. So as an extension of the previous point, when you are talking to people, talking to your audience, or whether you're talking to friends, family, collaborators who are going to help you flesh out some of these memories and experiences and the overall narrative of the piece, what might be really helpful to do is sit with a dictaphone or a recording device or app on your phone, something like that, in order to record conversations that you're going to have with the purpose of documenting those conversations to help you create your notes for the final project. You might also like to do this for your own memories. Not everybody is somebody who wants to write things down. Not everybody is somebody who wants to create their notes in a unified file on their computer. It might be easier for you to just talk it out. And if that's the case, whether you're with somebody or whether you're by yourself, you might like to have that dictaphone present and hit that record button and then just talk and record at your own pace. Don't feel the need to fill the gaps. And don't feel the need necessarily to press stop and start all the time. Just at your own pace, recounting as much as you can remember. If you are going down the route of creating an audio file or a video file in order to present your life story, this is also really good practice for talking articulately and fluently when it comes to the final recording, because a lot of people concern themselves with stumbling over their words and don't feel like they're a particularly natural orator. So going through that process can really help tell those stories. Focus on storytelling. A lot of this section is to do with engagement, and it's to do with how engaging you can be for your audience. I keep talking about detail in this course, and I keep talking about how if you can remember very specific details from certain memories, it makes it all the more enjoyable. Why is that? Well, it's because people love to hear the story. They don't just want the facts. They want how you felt. They want the emotion behind it. My dad in his film spoke about holidays that he used to take with his parents down to the south coast, and this was quite a regular event for them. And he could have just said, we used to go down for holidays to the south coast every summer, and we used to stay at this hotel in this town, and it was lovely. And then he's given you the information, but he's not told the story. Instead, what he said they used to do was get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark out. They would drive all the way down and go through London rather than round London, because the place that they were going to was, I think it was Broadstairs in Kent. And they used to drive through London, and London was empty at this time of day, and that's why they left so early, was so that they could get down there at a time of day where they could drive through London and the streets were all empty, and it was quite mysterious and magical. And then he went on to say that when they got down there, because of the difference in the age between himself and his brother and sister, that is to say they were much older than he was, they'd gone on to university and the working world while he was still young enough to, I think he was about 12, 13 at this time. And he said that the dynamic between his parents was very different from the dynamic with his sister and his brother. And so these holidays, while lovely, could feel lonely as well. And he was like, it was just my mum and my dad and myself. And there would be times when I'd take this old transistor radio, this Russian-built transistor radio, with me and listen to music. And that was something that I really enjoyed doing, because I didn't necessarily have brothers and sisters around me that I could play with and engage with. And So the happiness that I took and the joy that I took often were with regards to activities that I would do by myself. And he's painting this emotional picture of the events that took place, not just the events themselves. Suddenly I'm feeling how he's feeling, or how he felt in that time and place. And it's such an important thing to consider the story behind it. Who are the people behind it? How are they feeling? Not just a recollection of events and a time scale of events that happened. I think, the more that you can focus on the detail of how people felt, why they did the things that they did, and the emotion behind it, it's just going to transform it into something so engaging to watch. Embrace emotions. This is going to be quite a difficult one for some people. Some people don't like showing their emotions. I understand that. I think that's fine. I don't have any issue with that. Everyone's different. I will say that those people also might not gravitate towards a process like this. So by extension, if you are somebody who's interested in doing this and going through a process like this, you might like to consider embracing your emotions and feeling like you have the license to be emotional in the way that you write your book, or in the way that you deliver the information in an audio recording or a video recording. So what do I mean by that? If you're talking about something happy, don't be afraid to laugh and smile and enjoy it and relive that moment. Equally, if you're talking about something that was very emotional for you at the time and distressing, I'm going to say this. My advice, it's only my advice, if you feel that you start to cry, embrace it. Don't fight it. Let it happen to whatever extent, whether it just be, a little tear that you wipe away, or if you, if you find yourself all of a sudden in floods of tears because it's a very emotional moment, my advice would be, let that happen. Compose yourself, get ready for the next take, go into the next take, and then when you get to the edit, fade to black. That's what they do in a documentary, a talking head style documentary, is they'd allow it to happen, and then invariably you'd hear people go, I'm sorry, can we take a break? And they'll take a break. But they've left that in the edit because it contextualizes the significance of the emotions that person's feeling. It's not just a little emotional, it's a lot. And again, that will provide so much context and nuance in the information that you're delivering. And so we, the audience, can understand that this really meant, whatever it is that you're talking about at that particular time, this really meant a lot to that person because look how it's affecting them. And as a species, we naturally empathize. We naturally want to sympathize with people. And yeah, I think there's something beautiful and artistic and engaging about allowing yourself to be vulnerable on camera, because this is a vulnerable experience. I feel vulnerable right now. Every time I trip over my words while I'm trying to deliver this information down the lens. And there's nobody else here, by the way. It's just me, just to provide you with a little bit of context. I'm currently sat in a room by myself, and I'm feeling that pressure for everything to be perfect. And unfortunately, you do have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You have to allow yourself to make mistakes in order to get it right. And yeah, I think that allowing yourself to be vulnerable on camera will manifest sometimes as being emotional, and don't shy away from that. I think, allow it to happen naturally. The whole thing should be authentic. You don't want to give a version of yourself that is not really true or was a bit of a presentation. That's going to have the opposite effect, I think, to what this is really all about. I really think that, that authenticity is at the heart of what this project is for anybody taking part. And so, yeah, embrace the vulnerable nature of where you're sat and what you're going through. I am, and right now, and it's hopefully making it all the better for it. Perspective and subjectivity. So this is leaning into other people that might be affected by you telling your story. That is to say, some of the things that you talk about might also be their memories because you might have gone through it together. They may have been adjacent to it, and so they may have been another person who felt slightly differently about the thing that you're talking about, but they experienced it at the same time as you did. It's about knowing that your story is only your story, and other people might have experienced things differently. Incidentally, this is also a two-way street. It's important that you remember to have that perspective. It's also important that your audience remember to have that perspective. I'm sure that if you're talking about difficult topics of conversation, or things where things are open to interpretation, some of your audience might think to themselves, well, that's not how I remember it. Okay, fine. But this isn't your life story. This is this person's life story. And they have the license to talk about all the things that happened in their life according to how they experienced it at the time. It might even be nice to qualify that at the start of your film and say, this is how I remember it being. Or perhaps more appropriately, at the start of each section. If there's something, let's say, for example, let's give an example that normally helps. If something happened at work, let's say a relationship broke down at work. Let's say you're in business with somebody, okay? And the working relationship that you had with the partner in that business broke down for some reason. The business ended up folding, and it was a difficult thing to process, but you want to include it in your life story because it was a big part of your life, owning and running a business. You might be mindful of the fact that that other person who you were in partnership with will see things completely differently. So it might be nice to qualify that with, I'm going to talk now about a business that I had and how it dissolved. And I just want to start by saying that this is how it happened according to me. Obviously, the other people involved might see it differently, but maybe by viewing this, they might gain a little bit of understanding and perspective of why I felt the way I felt, why I argued my case so hard and fought my corner so hard. And that ultimately, I still feel like I can celebrate the great things that we did together. I still hold on to that and I still treasure that. And I do still grieve for the business that was lost in the process because it meant so much to me. But the reason it broke down was because, and then you can go on to explain in your opinion and in your words why things went south. I think that turns a negative or potential negative into a positive, and it shows a willingness on your part to be subjective. And I think if you show that willingness, then your audience might be willing to accommodate that as well and go, well, do you know what? I respect that. I respect the fact that if that's how you felt at the time, and let's say a lot of water has passed under the bridge now, then yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's also possible, and I spoke about this in the introduction, that people might want to use this as a vehicle to explain their side of the story to people that they've perhaps lost touch with, or perhaps, if they want to talk about a previous marriage that has subsequently broken down, and they might want the video or the book to reach that person in order to, tie up loose ends and feel a sense of closure around what was a very difficult point in their life. In fact, you could go a stage further and say people might want to go through this entire process purely with that objective. They might say, I want to sit down in front of a camera because I want to talk to my estranged sister. I want to talk to my estranged son. I want to feel like I can reach out and be heard by the person that has walked away from my life, but that now with perspective, I can see that the tremendous value that they brought to my life, and that yes, things were difficult at the time, but maybe this is a vehicle for reconciliation with that person. So yeah, I think by showing that sense of subjectivity, everything that I'm talking about now as well is pertaining to emotions and relationships. It might be just the facts. It might be that you want to qualify what you're about to say by saying, this is how I remember it. It might not have happened exactly like this. I mean, something that came out of my dad's story was he mentioned a specific part of my grandpa's working life, and then somebody who was a little bit better versed within the family watched the video and said, oh, you know, he didn't actually work in that sector or with those people, he worked in this sector. And I think my dad, in response to that, was like, oh, have I got that wrong? And sort of felt that sense of panic that he documented this thing incorrectly. And I can't stress enough that from my point of view, that's not the point. That's not the point of why you're doing this. It's not to be absolutely 100% accurate with everything that you say. You're talking about a life story. This is not a History Channel documentary where you have to get the facts right. And by the way, we're constantly finding out things from history that turned out not to be true anyway. There was a time when everyone knew that the world was flat. There was a time that everyone knew that the earth went round the sun, etc. I mean, I'm saying that there are people out there now who are adamant once again, all of a sudden, that the earth is flat. But we won't get into that. The point is, knowledge and history, as much as we might not like it to, does have an element of subjectivity to it. And I think if we qualify that with this is how I remember it, then you have the license to potentially, you know, have a conflicting memory to how somebody else remembers it, and that not be a problem. And so really what I want to do is take that weight off anyone's shoulders and make sure that something that doesn't stop them from going through this process is fear of getting the facts wrong. It's not about that. It's about connection. It's about reaching out to your audience. It's about letting those people in, and it's about legacy and cementing your relationship with those people. And you know, getting a small detail about where somebody worked slightly wrong is really not the point, and it's not a big deal. And I wouldn't labor on that if that happens. Make it enjoyable. This is, again, one of the themes that's going to run through every episode, and I can't stress this highly enough. This, for me, is a celebration of somebody's life. It's a celebration of all of the ways that they have touched the lives of the people around them, the relationships that they've made, the accomplishments that they've had, the advice that they have to give to other people. It is a celebration of a life. As such, it should be 100% enjoyable as a process to go through, enjoyable to record, whether that be as the written word or as a audio or video recording, and it should be enjoyable to watch. I would therefore suggest that people strongly lean into the positives, the positive memories, and you know, where possible, focus on levity and things that are fun and or even funny, and not take it too seriously where it doesn't need to be taken too seriously. And remember that at the heart of it all is your audience, and if they're enjoying watching you on camera, enjoying yourself telling all of these stories, that is the primary objective of a piece like this. So yeah, I can't stress that enough. Focus on the enjoyment, focus on the celebration, and yeah, I think that it will do exactly what it's designed to do. Practice. I would suggest that for a lot of people, almost all the elements that are going to go into this process are not things that people are going to be experts in. That is to say, people are not experts at recalling memories. People are not experts at writing books. They're not experts at shooting videos or editing videos together. And with that being said, firstly, it's going to be a learning process, and you have to embrace that and not get too downhearted if you're not brilliant at it first time round. And secondly, practicing can make a real difference, even with regards to these skill sets. So when you're writing your notes, don't be afraid to rewrite your notes again, with a little bit more detail, or focusing more specifically on the elements that you like and that you'd prefer to talk about. When you're writing your book, create a first draft and think of it as a first draft, and pass it out to an editor, pass it out to friends and family, and see what they think and see what their feedback is, and embrace that feedback, or at least acknowledge that feedback, and then have another go. The big one for me is presenting to camera, like what I'm doing right now. This is taking me an awfully long time, because, for example, I get halfway through a sentence and then I'm like, what am I trying to say here? Or or I'm thinking, oh, I could have done that better. So I have to do different takes, and then hopefully you don't see any of that. Hopefully you see the finished article, and it makes me look particularly articulate and that I present really well. A similar example to that would be when I shot my dad's life story. We were shooting for about 40 minutes, and he attempted to tell the same story, the first story that he was going to tell, which was the early memories of his life, and he did a great job. He told that first chapter, if you like, about 3 times in a row, before eventually we got one that he felt so relaxed by the time he was telling it for a 4th time, that's the take you see. And it makes him look like this really great and natural orator and storyteller. But in actual fact, he had a few practices at it before we got a take that we were like, that's a really lovely start to this film, where he doesn't look nervous. He looks really well practiced. He looks really comfortable and calm. So practicing telling these stories is key. Now, in addition to the filming day that I did with my dad, I also said to him, I encouraged him, I said, practice telling these stories. If you're out on a walk, knowing that you're going to be in front of a camera, if you're out on a walk, practice telling the story to yourself. If you're in the shower, practice telling the story. And keep your notes with you while you're doing that, because you can then refer to your notes and think, is there anything that I missed? I'm doing that right now between each take. I'm going, is there anything that I missed? And then I'm redoing it if I need to. Or I'll edit them in at a later date if I record them separately. And that, apart from anything else, yes, you're going to get better at it, first of all. So, for example, as a storyteller, your cadence is going to be higher and lower. It's going to be more dynamic, which means that it sounds more engaging. What I'm doing there is I'm taking my cadence up and down, rather than talking everything like this, and then it doesn't sound particularly like I'm interested in what I'm saying. I might also use volume to make a point, because if I'm talking about something really distressing, I might like to talk about it in decreased volume, in a lower cadence. I might also like to adjust my facial expression to give more impact and draw my audience in. And if I'm talking about something that's really light and funny and airy, then I might like to gesticulate more with a smile on my face, incorporate facial expressions like raising my eyebrows. It's funny, it might feel strange at first, but it's going to help you to naturally become a better storyteller. Now, if you want to take that to the nth degree, there are people out there who can help you to become better at storytelling. And if that is something that you were interested in exploring that, I would highly recommend it, because this is something, as we've already stipulated, this is something that has the potential to last forever. So if you want to do it right. And I'm sure that there are many people out there who have a background in performance or in presenting who would be delighted to help you in order to tell your stories in a more engaging way. Don't be a perfectionist. I'm going to have to be a little bit of a hypocrite now, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And here's the thing. If you're aiming for perfection, it's going to get in the way of your process. It's going to stop you from making progress, because it's never going to be good enough, or you're always going to think you could have done it better. There's a time and a place for that. If you are an architect and you need to build a hospital, it's got to be perfect. If you are putting your life story to paper or on video, people are more interested in who you are and seeing your energy and your emotion and understanding who you are as a person than how perfectly you tell your story, you orate, or how perfectly it's edited together. There's a quote that's something along the lines of, great is the enemy of good. And I'm learning slowly to appreciate and understand that quote and embrace it as much as possible, because it's important to get something over the line and get it finished and feel that sense of satisfaction and that completion. If greatness is stopping you from completing that project, then you're going to waste an awful lot of time and energy on something that's never going to come to fruition. I'm going to let you in now on another little secret while I'm filming this. And by the way, the reason that I keep doing this and keep mentioning things that are happening right here and now as I'm filming is because I want you to understand that even though I might look like I'm really eloquent and articulate and coherent in everything that I'm saying, this is lots of takes that you're seeing right now. And I'm taking all the best ones and I'm putting them together. So for example, after I shot the first video, which was the introduction, I looked at it and I considered doing the whole thing again with a shave and a haircut, because I was like, oh, you know, I want my hair to look nicer and I want my, you know, my face to look nicer and all this kind of stuff that frankly, I just didn't need to burden myself with. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. And I dare say a lot of the takes that I've already done for this tutorial, I probably didn't need to do a second take, but I'm so preoccupied with this being absolutely perfect and it has to be right. And I think, yeah, the long and the short of it is people are much more interested in the person on the screen and what they have to say and a little bit into who they are. That's the purpose of the film, right? And when you go into marketing, you go into advertising, you go into videography or whatever it might be, you know, a good brief will always involve how is the person supposed to feel when they're watching it, right? And if it's a fashion shoot, then yes, the clothing needs to look immaculate because it's a fashion shoot and it's all about the clothing. Well, this isn't all about the clothing. It's not all about the hair. It's not all about, you know, how articulate I can be while I'm talking. It's about getting the information across. So by hook or by crook, I'm trying to do that right now, and I hope that it's coming across well. For you guys going through this process of your life story, it really is about capturing a little bit of the beauty of who you are and celebrating the life that you have led and the relationships that you have formed. And if you are able to do that to any extent, that is what people are going to love. I can't stress enough that they're not going to care about, you know, if you stumble over your words, it doesn't matter. That's okay. Keep going. That's a little bit of authenticity in itself right there. You know, if you don't have really brilliant graphics or music, and you know, because you don't have phenomenal editing skills, that is not a crisis, and you don't need to worry about that right now. Right now, there's a car outside that's got a really, really loud engine. It's revving its engine, and do you know what? I'm going to keep this take just to make my point. Hopefully, you won't hear it, or maybe you will. I don't know. But I'm going to keep this take just to make the point that it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. So yeah, don't be a perfectionist, and do embrace the process and the emotion, the emotional involvement in what you're doing. It should be at the heart of the projects, not creating something that is worthy of Netflix. Be prepared. This is the final thing to say, really, especially if you're creating a recording of some sort, whether it be audio or video, is be prepared for the day that you actually commit to pressing that record button and putting something down digitally to edit together later on. You want to have all your ducks in a row. You want to have all of your notes with you, and you want to feel like you are prepared to tell these stories. If you want the stories to be quite natural, I suppose you don't have to particularly rehearse anything. If you want the material to flow a little bit more readily, then you might want to do what I do, which is practice telling the stories over and over again in order to maximize on the time in front of the camera. And also, you don't want to feel like you left anything out. It would be a shame to look back and go, oh, I forgot to mention that, or I forgot to mention this. So really, it's just about feeling prepared. There are a few little hints and tips as well that we could talk about with regards to being prepared for going on video. Is I would say, you know, if it is forever. So you might like to do your hair. You might like to put on some makeup. You might like to dress nicely. I mean, I haven't bothered today, but you know, you might like to sort of think, this is something that I want to look smart for, because you know my family are going to see it, and I want to feel like I look very presentable and look very smart and handsome or beautiful or whatever. Another reason why it might be a good idea to feel prepared is if, for example, you're bringing in a videographer to help you with the video elements of your life story. You are on somebody else's time as well, and it will be a long day. Okay, so when I shot my dad's life story, we assigned a whole day for the shoot. We shot it in his living room, and we did a couple of things in preparation. Firstly, we timetabled the day with lots of things like break for a cup of tea, break for lunch, break for another cup of tea, break for a bathroom break, or whatever that, you know, was necessary or required, because I knew that in order to create a 90-minute feature film, we were probably going to have to record for approximately 4 hours, something like that, in order to edit it all down. Firstly, because I knew he'd need second takes, third takes, fourth takes. Secondly, because you want to allow for technology potentially going wrong, which it does happen. And because we were in his house, I was thinking to myself, the doorbell might go. We might get somebody, you know, revving their engine outside the house. There's all sorts of things that you might want to allow for in that process. So yeah, it can be quite a long day. You also want to make sure that nobody has any expectations of you on that day, so that you can dedicate the whole thing. Dedicate the whole day to the process. You want to make sure that your phone's turned off. You don't want to get halfway through a really important bit of dialogue only to have, you know, it's like, oh, well, we're not going to recapture that moment in quite the same way again. So yeah, I think generally keep one eye on feeling prepared for every eventuality, and make sure that you know your stuff as well as you possibly can, so that nobody else is waiting on you in the process. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been informative. I think the process is the big obstacle in a lot of this. I think once you've decided, yes, this is something that I want to go through, and you've done all the whole introduction thing, the next few stages are really enjoyable, but the process can be a sticking point. And I think if you can educate yourself on what that process might look like ahead of time, and really structure your time around how you're going to put it all together and setting yourself those goals, then it can be less of an issue, and then the rest of the process can be much more enjoyable. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to sign off the way I have done in the last couple of episodes and say I wish you all the luck in the world going through this process. It's a fantastic process. And I'd love to hear about it, so feel free to drop down in the comments of this post and tell me all about how you're getting on. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.